Go for it, Emily, go.
All right, I'll start. So, the first one I'm going to read came about from a prompt that Rae gave us. We're part of a poetry group where we share work, and it was for a project that I think we never got off the ground.
Another one of my mad schemes. Yeah.
But some of us did get some poems out of it at least. And the prompt was to write about your relationship to the sea. So everyone else in the group, being Welsh, thought that was quite a natural thing to write about. I'm from Canada, and the part of Canada that I'm from is about a 2-hour flight from the sea, or a 6-hour flight in the other direction. So I had not seen the sea until I was 9 years old, when I went to Prince Edward Island in Canada, where Anne of Green Gables is from. And then I went to Florida, I think, the same year, so I saw the sea in 2 different ways, which was very exciting. So this is called The Sea is a Foreign Country. Selecting a sky blue pencil crayon to color in 8 by 11-inch Mercator maps, 7 seas sold to us as oceans, always oceans, vast and frightening and far away. The Atlantic, we were told, is our ocean by proximity, a tenuous connection. The St. Lawrence Seaway gives way to freshwater folk like us, salt and French on the tongue, when we travel to watch whales because they are threatened. Joy feels like pain when they crest the surface. In fascination of seashells collecting zebra mussels at Lake Simcoe, I swore they hid pearls before slicing heels and choking waterways. In Florida, I first felt skin salted, tight and itchy. I stole true seashells in a bucket, retreating back to swimming pool chlorine. More comfortable than aggressive waves, Australian riptides gripping my ankles like the undertow that nearly drowned my mother in Pacific Acapulco. Yet I could nap peacefully in the sun on Lake Bolaton, a familiar cradle, as if it were Lake Huron's opposite shore. So Swansea is an ocean place, despite being called the sea. Lakes have margins, bodies of water drawn by bodies made of water on children's maps. So my approach to writing that was my sort of absence of a relationship to the sea, and how it was quite an abstract idea for me for quite a long time, kind of just a color on a map. And once I got going, I found that the words sort of, when I started jotting down ideas, the words sort of moved into each other and led to different waterways, lakes and rivers that I was more familiar with, and sort of what the difference is, or why does it matter if the water is salt or fresh, or what that means to me. And then I came out with this sort of odd meandering poem. So,
do you want to ask me questions about it?
Do you want to? You don't have to.
How did you feel about writing that? Were there bits of it that you kind of felt you had to really work through, or did it all flow out quite naturally like water?
I guess I felt sort of amused by the assumption that everybody has a relationship to the sea. And I wouldn't say that it flowed easily, because I still don't, I've lived here for quite a long time, but I still don't really like swimming in the sea. It feels quite strange to me. I was home in the summer and was swimming in lakes and, in fresh water and just without waves. Like, I'm really uncomfortable with waves. And I don't think I ever will become so. But I have a friend in Australia who, I went swimming with her there, and I was really scared, but she had been sort of trained by her dad to swim in the waves, so yeah, it was almost an uncomfortable poem to write.
Did it change your relationship to the sea, writing the poem?
Only in the sense that I was like, yeah, I'm a lake person. It made me feel much more Canadian.
Yeah, there you go, now you know something.
Yeah, I learned about myself.
One question that's kind of tied to it, but more in a metaphorical sense. You've got the flowing water. How do you cope when the words aren't flowing? How do you cope with the sort of guilt of being unproductive that writers tend to have?
Well, I'd say if I'm writing fiction, then I agonize about it. And with poetry, I just sort of, I try not to like poke the bear. I kind of put it away and sort of don't want to bother it, and it kind of comes to me when it's ready. Like I hadn't written a poem, and I think I'd written maybe 1 or 2 in the past year, and I wrote 4 in one day this week. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do any sudden movements. I don't want to scare them away. But now I feel like I want to write some more. It's just come back. So maybe it's not guilt. Maybe it's like just fear of them.
Yeah, maybe I need to learn from that.
I don't know. So, should we move on to Rae?
Yes, I forgot we were doing it like that.
Yeah.
I thought I would start with a poem called Wood Thinking, which is a shape poem. And it's meant to look a bit like a tree, obviously not too much, but it's supposed to suggest a tree. So it's got the branches at the top, the trunk in the middle, and the roots at the bottom. And that's a deliberate ploy to reflect the fact that I'd been reading about trees being kind of having these amazing root systems where they sort of talk to each other and communicate through their root systems, and they can give nutrients to a particular tree, or if there's a tree dying, it will release its nutrients into the soil in favour of the rest of that kind of tree community. So that was sort of an idea that I had read, and it just had sat there like a little egg in my brain ready to hatch. And then I was sitting on a train one day, and I was just thinking about how trees, as we think of them, are trunks and limbs and branches and crowns, and they're the kind of bits you can see, but actually most of it's happening down there under the soil and we don't see it. And so this poem came out of that sort of musing that I had about trees, and it's called Wood Thinking. Once you understand that trees are earthed on a tipped compass, that air is the water where they dip their toes, you can know how a wood thinks, not through the breath exhaled from wooden lungs, but as a creature stirring in the earth beneath, a steady intention of intellect bound into a great root ball, electric impulses of soil, fibrous earth as medium of thought. You can listen to ancient knowings, listen, for the creek begins there, where the tree first uncurled from its gleaming seed and turned 2 ways. There, in the small songs of the sap rising, an oak clockwork set to the round ringing ribboning of seasons, pushing up numberless clinker-built ribs that rise and clasp and rise. But also from this dark fist of roots, branch wires drill down, vertebrate, the tree's nerves, the tympan straining, a long ear horned into the ground, attending feverishly to the earth's mutter. Listen, nonsense and secrets, the world's scrabbling and worming, lousing to itself. Why has nobody thought to change the words for where a tree thinks? For there is no electric beat at the head, in the wind rustle of the green leaf crown, in the heartwood of the trunk, nor in the muscles of the leaning limbs. Wood thinking is a brain in soil. It is there deep in those thrilling roots, where the whole wood gathers itself to listen and marvel at the shuffle of words. So, oh, thank you. You can clap all that. I think that's the joy of poetry for me, is kind of having those musings and then climbing into it through language and almost kind of circling around it again and again, the same ideas, and finding that perfect way of saying the thing. And sometimes you need 2 pages to do that, to kind of get to the root of the idea. And I think doing it through language and then editing it, this wasn't a shape poem when I first wrote it. This started out just as kind of run-on lines and verses, and it was only in going back over and editing it that that poem emerged as it is now. So I think there's a process to poetry where you maybe get that first kind of splurge down on the page, but then you go back and you write it again and again and again until you kind of crack it, or you get as close as you're ever going to get. And maybe a poem's never fully written, but this is where it is now, and that's where it's going to stay. But yeah, that's my process with that one, I think. But there are other ways in, aren't there?
Yes. I was going to ask you, with the shape of it, did you, once you started sort of molding it into shape, because if it didn't start that way, did you feel sort of liberated by the shape, or did it make it harder then?
It was like that aha moment, I think, when I thought of doing it like that and went, oh, there's the poem, because I'd sent it out to a few places and I felt like there was something good there, but it wasn't quite there yet. So it had rejections, like probably half a dozen or more rejections, and then I looked at it again and took it to bits and then rebuilt it, and that was the kind of aha moment of going, yeah, there it is, that's where it was all along. Yeah, and I think I like the fact that there's more of it in the roots than the crown as well, but that was natural. Yeah, that was sort of a natural turning point in the poem anyway, so it just sort of naturally happened like that, but that was just serendipitous, really. You need a pinch of luck when you write as well, don't you?
Yes, that too.
That was going to be my question, is that how many poems have you got where you feel like you've saved them just through the shape, and how do you know whether it's the shape that you need to edit or whether you need to do more with the language? Where does that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if I can answer that. I think sometimes you'll almost snag over a bit of a poem, won't you? You'll kind of read it and go, oh, that's not right. The way those lines break isn't quite doing it for me. That's not quite what I'm trying to say. Because you use line breaks for meaning, for pauses, for breath, you know, or run-ons even for kind of emphasis, or to break an idea apart that wouldn't normally be broken apart. So I think there's so many different ways you can go back and look at a poem again and go, oh, I think that line break would be better there, or I've split that in an unnatural way and it's not actually working, well, now I look at it again. So you always need to go distance yourself and go back, I think.
It must help you to read it aloud, you know, just to have it in that shape and know where to stop, where to emphasise things.
Definitely does.
Yeah, I found that with shape poems before. It's just, you sometimes have to speak them before you know what shape they're going to take.
That's really interesting, yes.
I think it's
Can I ask you, if we're allowed to, I mean, like, if you've got, like, you're writing a poem, like you said, no, it's not quite what I want to say, but if it instinctively, it seemed like when you were talking about the talk, it was like talking underground, but it's almost like the chattering masses of people, and it's like history, you don't know where it's going to lead, but that's the mystery of it, and to me it was about, I may be wrong, well, it's just a reaction, mystery.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you look at trees, they're all the same, they stand there, they grow, they don't do it, you know what I mean? No, they're not, but, you know.
I quite like the idea that there is this secret world that we don't know about, and they're all chattering away in their tree language, and there's a fascination in that, isn't there? I want to know everybody's secrets. I'm Nosy Parker, so I suppose that's my way of trying to find out how a tree thinks.
And scientists have discovered that trees talk to each other underground. They have this whole, like a telephone network.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's just a poem waiting to happen, isn't it? I've tucked that one away.
I think I heard that on the Ologies podcast, and the first thing I thought when I heard is that the poets are going to go absolutely nuts over this one.
Spawn 1,000 poems.
I didn't know mushrooms are the same as well, that they've got an underground, they actually, it's an underground plant, isn't it? And the
Yes,
mushroom
it's fungal, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, it's actually,
Is it mycella? Is that the right word?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's fascinating. There's a brilliant TED talk about it, so go and Google it.
So, Natalie.
So my second book was called Small. This came about as an idea I had when I was running. I'd suffered for a long time with an eating disorder. To an extent, it's still kind of there mentally. And I kind of imagined it as this child that had gone quite quiet and was clinging to my back. And the only time it would go really, really quiet was if I was running. And I thought, what would it be like to turn this into a character, and how would that help me deal with it? So Small was almost like a book of recovery for me. So this one I wrote after an appointment, and I was just sitting in the car and just feeling the weight of it, the weight of coping with it. Sometimes you cry in this car. The great shivery out-breath that tries to bear the world's ache comes rasping out again, then backs up into silence, waiting to fall into memory trap. It makes no sense. Heat murmuring on the bonnet of the car, its death engine that might once have roared into summer, the sunlight on registration plates, like houseflies on butter. Sometimes you cry in this car with the engine off, and that feeling you sometimes get, like stepping into a cramped elevator, both hands on the wheels sticky, as though you'd pressed them too long against the shimmering fever of the universe. So yeah, that was it.
So did you write it in the car?
I did actually. I had a receipt there because I got really angry after this session because I think I had to talk to a chair in the session. I was like, I can't talk to a chair, this is ridiculous. So I'd stormed out, sat in the car, saw a receipt there, and just little fragmented bits of words were coming out. And then I got to work and I was sort of scribbling on my notepad. And yeah, that's how it happened.
Do you find if you don't grab that feeling and that poem while it's kind of there, that it's gone forever?
Yeah, and there's so many times, I'm sure you found it as well, where you think, I'll remember that line, and you just don't. So when I worked in Sainsbury's a long time ago, there was just every pocket was just full of these bits of receipts, and I'd be pulling out these lines like I have no idea what that means. But yeah, it's interesting.
So, yes?
Can I ask, so you had that reaction to the appointment, you came out and sat there.
Yeah.
And I can sympathise. And so when you have that, did it help? Did it allow, sometimes it feels like you need to scream.
Yeah.
Did it feel like a scream coming out?
Yeah. And that was advice I got a lot of the time, because it's just anger. It was anger that was the predominant feeling. And people would say things like, punch a pillow. And I'd be like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do what you're telling me. And for me, it was such an act of catharsis to turn it into this little character, and in a way own it. Even though the character had control, in the small poems she's usually running around causing chaos, I was still in control of her, and it was like a flip of that control that eating disorders can have over you. Because that's the strange nature of them, is you think you're always in control all the time because that's what you want, but it's not, it's controlling you. And this sort of flipped the dynamic.
Talk to me about you've got a lot of similes and a lot of images.
Yeah.
Do they come to you in the moment, or do you have to get them later, or how do you do those?
Again, this could be just, a random line I found in my pocket and I think I need to do something with that. And it might not be till later that it finds the right poem, or a poem will grow around it. But a lot of the time they do come to me when I'm writing. So I might just start with one line and then the images start appearing. It's sort of like, when you sort of you look up, you might notice one star and then the other ones start appearing, and I kind of feel like it's like that with writing a poem sometimes.
I like that image of sort of lights coming on, but they're not chronological.
Yeah.
And like with your tree poem or like my water things, they all sort of, I don't know, it's hard. In my mind, they're swirling around until they find their place on the page.
Yeah, because I kind of had to think about what to say about, because it's really hard to pin down how you write a poem, isn't it? Because it can be quite organic. Sometimes you have to force it, but most of the time it just happens. It's only afterwards you can sit and think, how did I even do that? You just sort of sit with a blank page and off you go. But I think that idea of lights coming on is kind of almost, I thought of it as a web where the web moves around, or the centre of it does, but you're almost trying to reach along the strands of the web for the unusual images or the things right on the edge. So they still chime with the original idea, but they're not the original idea. So those images are sort of linked in somehow, but I think your stars say it really well as well. It's almost like those light bulbs that come on, but they're kind of further down, you've got to chase them down and get them on the page.
Yeah, that image came to me just because I thought about it some more, and I thought like some nights you can't see them because it's too cloudy, and that for me is when you're not in the mental space to write, and I try and tell myself it will clear and you will sort of be able to see them and write again. But that's how I sort of just calm myself down when I'm not being productive.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Do you ever have problems with the last line of your poem?
My favourite is trying to tackle a last line.
Yeah. Do you ever change it?
Yeah, sometimes the last line will move up to the title.
Then you think the first one you put down,
Yeah.
it's a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's quite agonising.
It is, yeah. I'd say that's probably the hardest part. It's so much harder than
So if you want to get the
starting.
publisher you have, you think, I've got to get this fit in how you wrote it too.
Yeah, feel like you've got to leave them sort of just almost sigh at the end and just want to go back again. So yeah, I spent hours agonising over that last line.
It's a relief to hear that.
You're not alone, you're not alone.
No.
Is it kind of like honest letting go?
Yeah.
It's like you let go and God knows what it is, but you've got to be able to, I don't call it harness it or write it or something, and maybe later on you get an idea of what you do want to.
Yeah, I know what you mean with letting go, because it's so easy to keep on editing and feel like it's not finished. Yeah, and you need to reach that point where like, I'm going to take the meaning away, it's done, I'm just going to leave it there.
Yes, I teach creative writing at a university, and I have a lot of students who are new to writing poetry, and often their poems are like 3 or 4 pages long. And the main thing I'll do is say, take what you have and make it fit into 2 pages, or even better, 1 page. And they're like, oh no, but that's how the good lines and images sort of bubble up to the surface. But you mentioned sometimes you have to force a poem. So I brought one that was forced, but in a nice way. So there's a literary magazine that every year has a contest called the 2-Day Poem Contest. And you have 48 hours, and they email you 10 words that you must incorporate into a poem. And you write it in that 48 hours and then submit it to the magazine. And the rules are quite strict. The words can't be made plural or hyphenated. They have to appear as they are. Some of the words might have more than one meaning, so you can interpret it how you want. But I've done it now for, I think, 4 years. I'm always trying to get my friends to join me, but they're like, I don't know about that, it sounds really scary. But I find that the poems that come out of it are, I didn't even know I had them in me. Like, they're really surprising. And usually with later edits, some of the words do feel forced, and I might take them out. But so this one came from that. So maybe you can try and guess which words were from the list. So this is called After Quarantine. I said we'll go crabbing on the sandy flats of the estuary, bootlegging moonshine and starshine in eggplant purple dark. The sun will be in Cancer when it is full of hope, never even considering summer could end. Patiently, I watched our correspondence meander day to day, plinking, popping messages. What have you baked? Any progress on the paperback you're writing? Did you know that this is called window? They were starving, heart muscle weak, but rushing in, ready for roosting. I guess having children is something I'd try. For so long I believed there was sweetness in the lethargy of your love.
Crabbing and ectosol, they were definitely 2 of the words, weren't they? They had to be.
Crabbing is not.
Oh.
Octothorpe is. I didn't.
Eggplant.
And Octothorpe is a hashtag. I didn't know what it was.
Oh.
Eggplant was one. It was a Canadian magazine, so they didn't say aubergine, but yes, eggplant. Any other guesses? Quarantine was not. I just wrote it during quarantine. Pardon? Lethargy. Yeah. Yes. Can't remember now.
Cancer.
No. That's just because I'm a Cancer. My birthday's in July. What else? I can't remember now. So that's kind of nice, I think, that some of them have just become part of the poem as if I'd chosen the words. Oh, peristeronic, which is pigeon-like, or of relating to pigeons. So that was a tough one to squeeze in.
You did it though, very well.
Thanks.
How did you get it to sound so natural? Because when I saw the word list, I just thought, I can't even attempt it. But that felt like it was coming from your experience.
Well, I did fudge it a little bit. The real thing was seagulls eating the chips, but I changed it to pigeons.
Oh, okay.
To make it work. But also, I don't know, I think that's sort of the mystery of poetry, that somehow my brain found a way through the writing to make it fit. So I really like that challenge. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is tough. I did actually do it this year,
Yes, you did.
but I didn't get my entry
In
in
the
time.
48 hours.
No. But it is a challenge, but it does push you into really unusual and interesting way. You have to sort of contort yourself to fit the poem sometimes.
The only thing is I find with 10 words it makes them quite long poems because you need a lot of words around them. This isn't the longest. I've written others from them that were maybe 2 pages. But you need a lot of words around them to make words like octothorpe and peristeronic fit into the poem. Can't have a nice little sparse, profound little...
It's a good thing to do, though, because on Twitter people have factions and teams around which of the words they've struggled to fit. There's always one word you can't fit in, but it's different for everybody.
Yes.
So it's funny how we all have different...
Absolutely.
I think it was, wasn't it Team Peachy this time? Peachy was one of the words.
Peachy was this year. I didn't find it hard, but a lot of people really struggled with it. Yeah.
There you go, who knew?
So, who knew?
Oh, I've got to do one now. I think another way for me into poetry, because I'm a nature geek, is researching fun facts about nature. So obviously my book is about bees, not only bees, there's lots of other things in there as well, but there's a definite thread, isn't there? And there's a theme.
Well, the title.
Yes, the title, the cover, and lots of bee poems. But in sort of researching bees, I discovered an amazing fact about bumblebees, which is that they turn their whole bodies into a musical note in order to get flowers to release the pollen onto them. Because they eat pollen, that's one of their, that's their source of protein. So to do that, they do something called floral sonication. And I really loved that idea, but to bring something personal to a poem, I think, brings it alive. You have to have a jumping off point or a connection with it in some way. So for me, my grandmother was an opera singer, and so bringing the language of opera into the poem as well, kind of for me, made it more personal and made it come alive. So it's called Sonication. I am more than you. I am a musical note. My body makes the colour of a middle sea. Flowers clutch their pollen tight as pearls, but my thorax, abdomen, hind legs, forewings, mandibles, antennae, tongue, together transform, hum, and then I become a trembling, vibrating, perfect note, sonicating. My body is diva, and when I hit my note, they throw flowers, drench their pearls down my back. I don't remember how I wrote it, but it's what I quite like about it as well is that there's a note of joy in it, because I think lots of poetry, especially my poetry, has those kind of down notes or those kind of emotional, kind of, you know, the big, working the emotional processing, exactly. So that's just pure joy, and the joy of nature and the joy of discovering something wonderful about bees and music and all of that stuff. It just feels like a really colourful poem to me. So I think, and it's quite short for me. I tend to write longer ones, but it's quite short and just one long note of joy. There you go.
One question from me. Have you always felt pulled towards the natural world when you're writing, or is that something that came in later? Because I'm finding I'm writing about it more after I've written poetry for a while, because I don't know whether I was put off by school poems that were all about nature and I couldn't connect with them, and then I just sort of found it later. I don't know if it's...
Not for me.
No?
It's always been there.
Yeah.
I think that's what gets me writing, is if I'm, you know, you sort of almost said the same thing earlier, it's kind of having those images or those phrases in your head and kind of putting them in your pocket. So I've always been someone who picks up a feather or a shell. So it's the same with words. I'll be going out and about on a walk and a collection of words will pop into my head. I'll see something unusual, or a bird flies, or, you know, there's a buzzard in a tree that we don't normally see in the woods. We saw that this morning. So there's just these collections of words that you just put them in your pocket for later, and then when you come to sit down and write, then
The Wait Your Buzzard phone.
I've got to write that now, haven't I?
It's almost like food or like nourishment, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you kind of arrange it like.
Yeah, but when you're ready, when you then open yourself out to write something, that sounds really pretentious, but when you sit with a blank page and you go, right, I'm going to write something now, then you've kind of got a few things you can bring out and stick down. Yeah.
Is it a good idea to get someone from your family to read it when you do your first reading to see what the reaction from their family are? Does that help?
I don't know, does it help you? Because my husband just says, oh, I like that every time, that's all I get, that's my feedback.
Yeah.
What about you?
It can be dangerous.
Yeah, he's I mean, at least he says, doesn't say, I don't like that, so could be worse.
I think having a reader is important, but not necessarily. You have to pick your reader. A good friend or someone in your family, as long as they're like the right reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need someone to tell you, I like it, but what about that bit? Could that be
You
better?
wait in vain for the reactions.
I always get, why doesn't it rhyme?
Do you?
Yeah. I showed
Why
the
does
book.
it rhyme?
Yeah, I showed the book and I said, what did you think of it? I liked the rhyming one about the sheep. I was like, oh, okay.
There you are. It's cruelty, isn't it?
Natalie,
Okay. This one is, I've done a few Greek mythology poems, and this one's based on my favourite character in Greek literature, which is Andromache, the wife of Hector, who kind of had to stand there and watch her husband get killed and watch her child get killed, and I just thought she's largely silent in the story, so I used this poem just to give her a voice. Andromache. Assume I'm wearing black. Assume I've swathed myself in the hollow shade of his bruised knees, dust-clogged and sticky. Assume I am leaching away with him. The tracks of his belly scar the dirt. Does anyone ask for his wife, hair dripping over the Trojan walls, towering 10 feet over the beetled men below, gleaming up and beaming through her? Assume the wind blew me over the edge of the wall, quiet and pale as salt. Hear me say nothing at all. See these living hands. Hear the smack of my palms against stone, blood coiling its way to my heart. Bind me tough as a horseman's rope. Blow my bones to polished pipes, they play when great men fall. For me, no tune at all if I should choose to stagger up, sway on broken toes, burst my lungs screaming for the dead men's bones, with our only child crumbling over tumbling stone in a gasp of blood and milk. When Hector cracked his back behind the chariot, when the bruises flowered blue, when our only baby spiraled like sycamore, the gods, I felt it too. I called Astyanax, I called Hector. Who called Andromache? Who?
So, do you find it an easier way into starting a poem when you have something like a myth or an existing story to inspire you?
I do, yeah, and I think it's because so many of the women were written by men, and they always paint the men as the heroes, and a lot of the time it's actually the women who are more heroic in the stories, but they're never portrayed in that way. So it's just a way to talk about that. And the book that I wrote with Mary Ellis Dunning, which I'll read a poem about later, we collaborated just looking at this idea in fairy tale and myth, and just wrote it from the wives and the partners' points of view and made them the heroes of the story. So yeah.
How much of you is in that poem? Do you bring your own? Because it feels quite like a sort of a York. It's a scream, isn't it? It's a rant.
I'm quite quiet. I think I'm an angry little person deep down. No, I think you do let a lot of yourself into your poem, and it could have been, I don't know, the frame of mind when you were writing it. You never really know until you look back later. So who knows? It's probably in a terrible mood that day.
Let them have it.
Sometimes you can just pour it all into a poem, and then it's like putting your feelings in a nice little box.
Yeah.
And then it's taken care of. So I thought I'd read a Swansea poem. So the other two that I read obviously came from challenges or prompts. This one came from, I used to work in an office on the high street, and I should have been doing office work, but I was mainly writing poems. And looking out the window at the the old Elysium building, quite close to the train station. It's a very beautiful building that is sort of crumbling away. And there are a lot of birds that live on it, and I would kind of watch their dramas unfold and see them raise their babies and everything from my office window. So I wrote a poem for them called Rock Doves, which is the other name for pigeons. Rock doves. The rock doves are breeding on the old Elysium, hens playing hard to get, hopping along the cracked balustrade, looking over shoulders, aloof and eager, at the cocks strutting on the chimney tops. They peer down from their parliament at the train-side brothel and the stumblers, high on the high street, oblivious to the wind, ruffling feathers for quick coitus on the ledge. This building is beautiful. Look at her regal windows, fine brickwork, gold-etched marble over the chained and boarded door. Tarted up for the bingo and used by the labor men, now saplings grow from her cracked cornices, and green wire netting tries to keep the rock doves at bay. But they are roosting, rooting into her fine lines and softening stone. They doze in her dormers and claim her highest peaks each hour, knowing theirs is the best view of the sea. I just realized I read two
pigeon poems.
Two pigeon poems. There are many other animals in Strange Animals, but apparently pigeons come up twice. I guess they're really inspiring to me.
To you? Maybe it's being in this building.
Maybe.
I think it seems like a pigeon paradise, Waterstones building.
Yes, I could
Is
imagine
it?
them
Yes.
roosting up here.
Yeah.
So you know all about animals and birds. Did you research to bird watching and
No, I would say that I really love animals and birds.
I see you've got a knowledge of them and you.
But I wouldn't say that I researched as such or studied them. I think studied only in observation, as in I didn't want to do my dry office work, so I watched these birds have their lives, or a lot of animals. Sort of the title for the collection came afterwards because one of my friends observed that there were a lot of strange animals in my poems. So I don't know, I guess maybe it's subconscious, they just come out.
Talk to me about sound in there, because there's loads of alliteration and it feels like sound is a really important part of the poem. Did it just come out naturally, or did you go back and work on that?
I would say alliteration is my favorite poetic device. It just always adds a little something. You can overdo it, obviously, but I think the desire to hear a poem rhyme is similar to sometimes you just want to hear like the rhythm of the language or a certain like musicality in it, and I enjoy playing with that in the words, and I think that helps me build poems as well. I think what would sound good together.
It really works on that poem because you can sort of almost hear them. But it's quite a sexy poem as well, isn't it?
Well, they have sexy lives up on the Elysium building.
Now I was going to say we can only imagine, but we don't have to now because we know.
Next time you walk to the train station, you'll look up and go, there they are. They're all, getting it on.
They do a lot of that, don't they? They have lots of broods every year, apparently.
They do, but they do mate for life. They're really romantic pigeons.
Cute.
Yeah.
You never see them on Valentine's cards, though, do you?
No. But that's why I like their real name, Rock Doves. It sounds more romantic.
Yeah, it definitely does. How many abandoned poems were there when it came to Strange Animals? Because there's that torturous process of once you think, okay, I've finished my manuscript, then deciding what's going in, what's getting pulled out last minute.
Maybe like between 5 and 10.
Yeah.
But then I ended up writing a couple of new ones at the last minute. And I don't know if they are better. Maybe it's all subjective.
Yeah, I always find that a really difficult part, deciding what's in the final one.
Yeah, I think sometimes some of them were maybe like, I liked the poem, but it didn't really fit with the group.
Yeah.
Just sort of an outlier. Who wants to read next?
Yeah, is it my turn? One of the ways into a poem for me is a collision between two unlikely things, and I often find that quite fruitful ground, really, like the cracks between two paving slabs, maybe. Is that good? I don't know if that is a good metaphor for that, anyway, actually, now I think about it. Anyway, I'm going to read this to you because it's a collision between a natural image of, I went to France when I was young. We got stranded, our car broke down, and we got stranded in this place in the middle of nowhere. I don't even know where it was to this day. And we ended up on a cafe and it gets really dark really quickly, so 8 o'clock comes and then it was just dark. And then it started to snow moths, and these moths were just kind of blizzarding down around us, and I've never seen anything like it before or since. But I think it's to do with their mating, so they mate, the males die and then they fall. And I ended up marrying that with the idea of unrequited love and a kiss. So I'll read it to you and then you can ask me about it. Whispers. Oh, the other thing you need to know is that the collective noun for moths is a whisper of moths. And when I discovered that, I couldn't not use it in a poem. It would have been illegal not to use it. Whispers. In France, before you loved me, it was summer, and a strange blizzard fell. Pale moths, each unique as a snowflake, flurried in whispers from darkness until the pavements grew white beneath their paper bodies, and cars slowed with their windscreen wipers flailing against the ultrasonic ecstasy of sky, rubbing up against sky. It was an ash squall, a mating storm, electric, everything sheathed beneath a skin of moths. We sat at a small table on the Bridge Cafe with side plates of sweet fig tart, coffee, watching moths perform their final act of love and fall from the sky's black mouth, thickening the lamplight, glancing down our naked shoulders to the street before slipping into the black river. And in the tumult, I waited to see if you would kiss me. The kiss came in its own shape. A single moth swooned against my lips, a fingertips brush, while you looked the other way, over the water, thought of something else. I found my mouth had been winged, stunned, altered by the sky's dying touch. It was the waiter who noticed and opened the parasol to stop the bodies falling onto the crumbed moons of our plates.
The poet can resist a collective noun.
No, it's against the law.
I mean, the most famous one is The Murder of Crows, but even that, I'd love to write a poem about that, but it feels cliche now.
Yeah, I know, it's true. I'm lucky Whispers was an outlier, nobody knew that one already. And it always gets the audience going, when I say that, because it is really beautiful, isn't it? A whisper of moths. It's the right now. But yeah, I think, again, these two things didn't even happen on the same night as each other. It was just the right image, and I wanted to write about the moths, and it was one of those memories that I had from years ago that I'd never really pinned down and done anything with. And then that idea of unrequited love and loving someone more than they love you, or them not noticing you when you're like heart-stricken for them. It just felt like the right setting for that emotion, so that's where the poem came from, really.
What's your favourite poem in the language of bees? Because that's my personal favourite.
Is it?
But yeah.
I don't know. It's like picking my favourite child, isn't it? I don't know. I like them all equally.
Oh, I like favourites.
Do you?
Too bad for the children. Yeah. I like some that I am more fond of than others, not that I dislike it.
I do like that one. I like reading that one. I read it a lot. You probably hear me read that about 1 million times now. That's all right.
I still enjoy it every time.
I quite like my little sonnet at the back. Be in a January Pilates class. I quite like that one. It's my favourite. Is it?
Yeah. Well, I like the whimsical.
There you go. It is. It does have whimsy.
Yeah.
So yeah. But airlings is nice. There's a poem in here about dead rabbits, which always get a poet writing. I don't know. Something about death.
Is there, like you said, you write a particular poem. Does that apply to the same you? You've got a favourite poem in your collection that you think, hey,
that's the one. What about you, Nat? You asked the question.
No, I think it's what you said, that some are better to read aloud and some are better on the page. So I've got my favourite read aloud ones and some that I don't read alout, I really like on the page. So.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, and I don't know if some are favorites or some that I feel like are maybe my best work or better work than others. Maybe it's more
Yeah.
but then other people might disagree.
I find the ones that I'm really fond of don't do very well. Other people don't get it. To me, it's like, oh, I nailed it there. I really got it. Other people don't get it.
Yeah. I have one poem that so many people have talked to me about since the book came out, and I didn't really rate it. I thought it was okay.
Which one is it?
And the one about planting a garden. It's a nice poem, but I've had maybe 6 or 7 people mention it.
Pigeon poem though.
Not pigeons. What about my pigeons?
Well, we all love the pigeons now.
There we go. I've sold you.
Okay, so for the last poem, I'm going to read them because Mari couldn't be here and she really wanted to be here. I'll read one from our collaborative book, The Wrong Side of the Looking Glass. I don't know if there are print copies left because these were a limited run, but you can get them on ebook. When she shouts, I drop it. Heave its silky bulk 20 ells down, her dry palm withered as cardamom. Twines her legs about the strands, so I haul her like a stubborn hook. Feet skipping the bricks as she passes each window in turn. Kitchen, bathroom, library. The shocking thing about it is how normal it feels to have a fully grown woman swinging my hair like an ape, strands like fistfuls of vines. Not once does she ask if it aches, she, whose only hurt was rampion tugged from the lawn, a sprig of herb whittled into the meals of thieves. And me, a thief's daughter, paying the price in unreachable heights, stubborn locks, days spent pressing handstands to the wall, or another evening trailing my hair to the garden, fishing for nameless heroes, some fully grown, dumb Casanova to spin me off into the sunset. But whoever asked, who carried who first? My scalp strains against the twice-a-day hall. The sun waltzes from east to west. In fairy tales, that's how it is. Sullen princess, drop-dead gorgeous, with nothing to do but swing her hair, stifle the scream when the roots tear slow from her skull.
Well, I think that's a really interesting one to end on when we're talking about process, because you wrote them together.
Yeah.
To explain how you did that.
So we found a story that we both wanted to write about, so we thought, okay, well, let's do Rapunzel and Gothel. So we'd take the characters and write our own poems each. Then we'd go in and edit each other's documents, leave comments. Then we'd switch again, do some more edits, switch again, and then we just decide on a final version for each one. So they are pretty much you'd notice that maybe one lends more to Mari's style, one lends more to mine, but it was a purely collaborative process, and it's really nice to have someone there keeping you accountable and keeping you writing. And it's amazing what you can end up writing when you're not working alone, and I think I learned a lot from doing that.
Did you know she had a complementary style, or was it good that she didn't have a complementary style?
I knew she had a complimentary style. We were at an awards evening together once, and we both won a prize, and I mean, we thought then, okay, we could have become complete rivals. We thought, actually, let's work together and just see how it goes. So, yeah. I mean, it's not always going to work. I've worked on collaborative projects before where people might pair you up with someone and your styles won't always work. They're just way too different. But yeah, if you know a poet whose style complements yours, it's always worth trying it.
And Rae, you've also written a collaborative pamphlet with
Yeah.
the poets.
It was called In Conversation, and we did it completely differently to you. Yours was much more collaborative than ours. We were almost like writing letters to each other. So we would just take one phrase from the previous poem and use that as a jumping off point for the next one. So they were completely different. Yours are so intertwined, they're brilliant, and I really love that you take both sides. So you've got Rapunzel, but you've also got Gothel, so you almost take both sides of it, which works really well because you were a pairing, and then you look at those pairings in the stories. I think it works brilliantly. Ours was more. Jean actually went away to America halfway through the process, so we were literally writing letters to each other, although they were electronic ones. And she went around, she was seeing Georgia O'Keeffe museums and all sorts of stuff in America, so that bled into the work quite a lot. So ours was very different, I think.
That's interesting. Because I hear about people collaborating, but no one ever tells you how they do it, so you just have to kind of work it out for yourself.
Yeah, people always ask who wrote which poem. Do you get that a lot
Yeah.
as well? That seems to be an obsession. It doesn't matter. It's collaboration.
I've never done it. I work alone.
Maverick.
That's right. So I think a really nice way to finish will be with a poem that Mary wrote all by herself.
She did.
So although she can't be here, she's here in book spirit.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that she was a part of today because she really, really wanted to be here. So we thought we'd read Eve, which is you haven't got Eve in your.
No, but it was she wrote that first, and then we worked on it, so that's her original version. We did do Eve and Lilith. Yeah.
So Eve. When Adam grew bored of plucking heads from daisies, God pulled me from his side, whittled my waist from a glinting rib, said, "This should keep you busy." It's true, our garden was plum ripe, lush as a sprawling reef, rose-flecked, ocean vast, but women can grow weary too. I like the small serpentine thrill, slithering long and loose as a constellation of pearls, the way he branched his body like velvet rope, his fig-sweet breath, his voice of spiced honey. I liked the glorious threat of fangs. "Try the fruit," he said, coiling, languid at the tree's ridged spine. The apple was a blood moon in my palm, a garnet scrabbled like a bulb from the earth. Its juice seeped sweet from my lips, rolled a reckoning over my chin. A thunderbolt struck the sky. When God exiled us, clattering the gates to a deafening close, Adam fumbled for my fist, whimpered like a hand at my side, coupled his palms, and I took another bite.
Applause for Mary. So that's how we write poems. We're really pleased everyone could come. Does anyone have any questions before we finish up?
How do you know when a poem's done? You've talked a lot about leaving it or not leaving it. How do you know when it's done?
You could just give yourself a quick slap until you start telling yourself to step away. Yeah, just get over it.
It's done.
I think, yeah, a good way for me to check is if I've been working on it a lot and then the next time I go back to it and I read it aloud to myself, if I'm not tempted to change things, or if it's a really minor thing, I'll think, okay, it's ready.
Reading aloud is massive.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. You've got, I spend a lot of time whispering to myself in corners. Just checking.
I think also if you just relax, you stop without thinking about it and you relax.
Yeah.
But I wondered, that last line, it felt like too clumsy, but I just thought it was a bit obvious. But
What in
the one you read, and then, yeah.
took another bite?
I don't know.
I think it's great. It's really defiant.
Yeah,
I
It's
love
really
it.
powerful. It's
Yes.
for women.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
Absolutely.
it isn't or it is, but I'm just like. And no, it's interesting. It's been very, like, to hear you talk about processes without. It's almost like defining undefined things, and it's almost more helpful than just.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
I think it's such a personal thing, isn't it, poetry
Yeah.
as well? Everybody's approach is different. There's no right or wrong. It's just what works for you and what feels true to the feeling or the story you're trying to tell. So, yeah, it's quite personal.
I was going to say, we've sort of explained our methods, but I think a lot of it is even unexplainable, as you said. But the nice thing with poetry is there aren't any rules, and I think there's no, I think bringing any anxiety into it hinders it. You just have to put it on the page and keep playing with it. That's what's fun
Play.
about poetry, is playing.
I was just going to say exactly that. It's about playing with language and seeing what you can do and kind of how elastic it can be.
And share it with people.
Yeah.
Because, it's originally it was always meant to be spoken and shared, or at the very least with someone that you like. And it's good to do poetry trades. We often trade work with each other.
Are you on the radio program, The Language of Bees? I said I saw it on the radio program.
People are always accusing
Of
me
the
of
art show or something. That
Oh,
call
maybe.
the
I wouldn't rule it
mentioned,
out.
Yes, you're right.
Could be. I don't think I've been on the radio, but who knows?
I think, no, it was like, it kind of embodied something psychologically. Poetry is a way of not dismissing yourself, you know? I thought,
Yeah, having a voice. Yeah.
no, well, all the poems and whatever, I don't know, but yeah, it was just, yeah.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. In writing poems, I know, some poems have like a really strong rhyme and others are like more loose in that regard. Do you find it different writing either of the two, or which one do you prefer?
Shall I answer that? We can take it in turns.
Yeah.
Because it's such a contentious one, isn't it? Because the fashion now is really not to rhyme. Personally, I think you almost end up having to force it when you need to rhyme something. So I find it puts too many constraints on me as a writer. I much prefer to free flow it and make sure that the structure and the form of the poem reflect what I'm trying to say in other ways. So I like spaces, I like messing about with punctuation. So that's much more interesting to me than trying to force a rhyme. Although I do have a rhyming poem in here, because there's a sonnet in there. So it has its place. And like the other things we were saying earlier, when you almost force yourself to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do, you can end up writing something that you wouldn't otherwise have produced, and it can be surprising. But personally, I prefer to write more freely than that.
I find like a true rhyming poem is really hard, which is why I avoid forms like sonnets and things, which maybe I shouldn't. It's yet another challenge. But what I do really like is sneaking some rhymes in, so that there isn't a scheme, but it still sounds musical to the ear. So I think there is that sort of thinking like, oh, poems either should rhyme or they shouldn't rhyme at all, and I don't think it's as clear as that. I think you should still be thinking of how it sounds, which is what the rhyme is all about, and a little bit goes a long way.
I quite like playing with rhyme, like you said, in a rhyme, and I think it depends what you're writing. If I'm doing a performance piece, I quite like working with rhyme. I think back to how poetry started, and it was meant to be spoken. It might have had music with it. I think you've got to, sometimes you read just things aloud and you find things that you might have missed otherwise, and then you find where things need to rhyme, where the rhythm needs to change, and it sort of takes on a musicality to it. I think it's quite a playful approach, but it can completely transform the poem you're writing. I think you know when a poem needs to rhyme or not. It has to find its own form.
I think that because rhyme can often be that dumpty 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 dum, kind of like has quick sort of structure in the rhythm as well. It's not just the rhyme, and maybe that's what's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think the trick is not to be too strict with yourself and just play with it.
Do you know what that is? So like with Shakespeare, how he wrote in iambic pentameter, we naturally speak in iambic pentameter. Yes. So that's why it sounds good to us.
Okay.
But if you try and sit down and do it, it's hard to do it, but that's the natural cadence of speech.
Of English.
Of English. I'm not sure about other languages, but definitely of English.
There you go, we've learned something.
Finish with a fact. So thanks everyone for coming. There are books for sale, coffees in the cafe, many books in the shop. We're happy to sign books if anyone would like. And we're really pleased you came.
Thank you very much.